now, everyone. President Obama is about to speak with Cuba's President Raul Castro on the first full day of his historic trip to the communist island. I'm Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. We are awaiting the president, as well as Mr. Castro. He actually will become the first U.S. president, President Obama, that is, in nearly 90 years to visit Cuba. Obama and Castro, they still have profound differences, including Castro's insistence on a one-party state and strict limits on the media and political dissent. And this is a trip, as a result, that many are chiding as just tone deaf, while others see this as a big business opportunity and all the economic opportunity that Cuba could actually represent. Well, joining me right now for their thoughts and analysis, Republican strategist Boris Epshteyn and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. Boris, starting with you, I'll give the viewers some background into what you were telling me as we went into commercial break. You were really struck here by the fact that Raul Castro did not come out and personally greet President Obama as he came down from the plane. And
Absolutely.
This is something that he's done for other leaders, including Hugo Chavez.
Right, Chavez, much lesser leaders. It was a complete slap in the face and a statement of, you're coming to me, you, President Obama, are coming to me, and we are the hosts, we are more important, and Cuba is getting the upper hand, which is a complete joke, right? And President Obama's State Department had to make sure that this would not go down that way. When Nixon went to China, that's not how it happened.
But
he was greeted
it did
formally.
go down that way.
It did, and it's sad. And it's just 7 years in, President Obama still does not have his hands around what diplomacy means, and that the ceremony does mean something, that it is important. So that was sad to see. And overall, this is the last year in office kind of thing. So he's having fun. Him and the First Lady are in Cuba, but they're forgetting what this means for the people of Cuba. As on the previous program we just heard, Americans could travel there, but Cubans cannot travel to America. What did Cuba and Cubans get in that deal?
Well, and you think about what it represents to all the people that escaped that regime and came here to this country. The reality is that regime is still a very tough regime to live under, and is not tolerant of a lot of differences, whether that be in the media, whether that be of any other political party. So, Leslie, when you look at this and you say, okay, all right, this is good, right? We want to be friends with our neighbors. There's some downside in this, too. How do you come out on President Obama's side saying that this is actually a good thing, knowing that there are tremendous challenges ahead still for that country and thus our relationship with them?
I lived several years in Miami, Florida, and I know a lot of people that escaped and their families who escaped Cuba under Fidel Castro's regime. First of all, Raul is not Fidel, and I do believe when Fidel Castro finally succumbs to death at some point, that will change going forward, first of all. Secondly, this is the very early stages of this relationship, and I do believe it will be mutually beneficial. But if we just look at how beneficial it can be to the United States, this is an area that we have not been able to, for 5 decades, tap into with regard to trade, any kind of business. And right now, the United States continues to experience a deficit in the import and export area, and we need to change that. And Cuba actually could be a game changer going forward.
I certainly have heard that
regardless of them not being able to fly.
A lot of people are saying, you know, look, the telecom industry is going to have a field day there. The hospitality industry is going to have a field day there. Boris, what could it represent economically? And is that really what it took to get through all this?
We could do well there economically, but we could do well in Nicaragua, we could do well in Argentina, we could do well in Brazil. There's plenty of countries that we could do well in. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean we have to engage if we disagree politically on some key issues.
Hold on one moment, Boris.
Sure.
They're taking to the podiums right there. Let's listen in. President Obama speaking, the first president there on this historic day as he meets with President Obama, the first U.S. president to go to Cuba in 90 years. We did hear, however, that while this is something, it's not quite enough. Castro saying a little bit more is needed from the United States. Just exactly what is that? I'm joined right now by Boris Epshteyn and also by Leslie Marshall. Boris, you heard that and you saw there's a little bit of a dig towards President Obama in the United States.
Absolutely. A couple things. First of all, Raul Castro's going first. He's getting to deliver his point of view first, getting to tell Barack Obama how he feels, and really chiding him like a school kid.
Well, it is his country.
It's his country, but we're the United States of America, the most powerful country on earth. And Barack Obama did a favor to Cuba by opening it up and going there personally, the first president in 90 years to do so. Again, the State Department should have insisted that A, Raul Castro come to the airport, and B, Barack Obama get to speak first.
Are you slighted at all by that, Leslie? Those two moves, not coming to the airport to greet our president and then insisting on going first and not really sounding too excited about any of this,
Right.
but rather saying we've got a lot more work to do.
You know, at the end of the day, whether it comes to peace, a change hopefully in government for the people of Cuba and our relationship with them going forward, or economic interest on both sides, I do think he should have been at the airport, but I'm not going to cry over that spilt milk. I do think it's his country and he should speak first. I have no problem with any leader speaking first when it is their country, and I'm not surprised that he's saying this is a good first step. This is not the deal that we would want, because that's what he needs to do to remain strong, or to at least have the illusion that this is just the beginning. And I think it is the beginning
I'm going to go
for
out
the
on a
Cuban
limb here
people.
and say this is a guy who doesn't look so happy. He doesn't look so thrilled that Obama is there. You'd think he might have started the entire speech with a big warm smile.
Right.
He might have said this is a big day historically for both our countries. Think of what we can do together. Instead, he's reading quite clearly from a script. Without a lot of energy, not much of a smile. He doesn't seem to be really that engaged in what he's doing. Is this just because he's a lousy politician and his brother was all that?
No, he's a pretty
So
good
much better?
politician. He's been around for a long time. He's a committed communist, maybe even more committed than Fidel Castro is. Fidel Castro was sort of the figurehead. If you look back at the famous meetings of the 80s between Gorbachev and Reagan in Geneva and Reykjavik, there was positivity. There was smiles, and the initial meetings were very positive and much more open than this speech. And even the speeches back then had a lot more of an air of positivity about them and hopefulness for the future. This is Raul Castro saying, well, thanks for coming, but I wish you brought more, and thanks for trying with Congress, but not enough for us.
Well, look, I just kind of wonder the motivations behind doing this. Economic, you can understand. I think a lot of U.S. corporations see a tremendous amount of potential there in Cuba, and so we wish them a lot of luck with that. But I also wonder strategically, is it smart for us to have, and I would probably argue yes, you want to have as many friends as you can have within your neighboring community. You want to have some friends close by. I guess the big question, however, Leslie, is can you trust Cuba to really be a friend in times of need? I mean, we're worried about North Korea. We're worried about, Russia, not because it's going to be communist again, but because Putin is such a wild card. And Cuba is close to our shores and represents something in that sense. Can we trust them?
I don't think that we can trust, quite frankly, any of our allies 100%. And if we look at the relationship that we have, where we do have, an economic open door like China, we certainly don't trust China. We've done things with Russia who we don't trust. Now, when we look at geographic proximity, and I think that's an excellent point, Trish, to bring up, it can't be avoided. I think, quite frankly, when we look at, not just as the President Castro of Cuba has mentioned the Zika virus, but when we look at the path of drug trade with Central America and the geographic location that Cuba has, and what the United States can do with them with regard to terrorism, with regard to drug trade, and quite frankly, even the path of the flux of immigrants that we have seen from Central American countries, I think that this is necessary. It's long overdue. We have not been attacked or threats of attack by Cuba. And quite frankly, I think Cuba needs us more than we need them.
I would
and
agree with
President
that, yeah.
I would
Obama
agree
knows
with it,
that.
too.
Let me ask you guys this. I mean, would this have happened if Hugo Chavez was still alive, Boris?
This was a big thing for Barack Obama. He wanted it as part of his legacy. So I think he would have done anything and everything to get there, even if America didn't get anything in return, or the Cuban people.
The United States of America. And I just question whether this that we're seeing unfolding today would have happened had Hugo Chavez still been alive. Leslie, your thoughts?
I thought of that myself, and honestly, I think that the United States has been waiting for Raul's big brother to die, because I don't agree that Raul is more of a communist than Fidel. If you look at some of the actions he's taken, especially with regard to the economy, in order to remain a figurehead, at some point you have to give something to the American not the American people, but the Cuban people in his position, and he knows that they are just so isolated, and especially after the death with Hugo Chavez and the change in dynamics politically in nations around the world, Cuba cannot be this isolated going forward.
They don't have they don't have the revenue stream in Venezuela to help support their good friends over in Cuba anymore. So that's also a component to all of this. Venezuela is less important to Cuba. But the reason I bring it up is we were talking about terrorism earlier, and Cuba harboring these terrorists. We know that Venezuela was able to harbor some Islamic fighters. It's been a problem in the tri-border region of Latin America, an area where Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay all meet. Basically no man's land down there. Nobody takes responsibility for it. And there's been some concern that potentially they could hide out in Cuba as well. Given this friendship that we are now embarking on with Cuba, is that something that we hopefully will no longer have to worry about as we think about Cuba from a national security standpoint, Boris?
Hopefully, but again, only if we trust them. And Leslie said we can't trust any of our allies. I think Britain and France would probably disagree. They hope we do trust them. And Israel used to be a country that was confident in our trust under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State. That's changed. So we do have to have allies who we can trust. Cuba is not a country who we can trust. You look at what they've been doing to their dissidents just over the last few days and weeks. They're cracking down on dissidents. So as far as terrorism goes, we have no idea what kind of actor Cuba is going to be, and I think the safe assumption is they're not going to be nearly as helpful as Barack Obama hopes. In fact, Cuba could continue to do whatever they've been doing while getting the economic benefits that we are now bestowing upon them.
So why do it then? It's money, it's business.
It's
we want an opportunity to have a tourism industry down there, Leslie, or is it let's get to them, make friends with them before the likes of North Korea is there?
You know what? Nations are businesses, in a sense, wrapped in different colored bows. And this is nothing but the bottom line, first and foremost. Secondly, the relationship comes later. It doesn't mean that you do a deal with the devil necessarily, and I don't feel this is a deal with the devil. But even when you look at relationships with allies that we've had for years, Germany is a perfect example. We didn't always have Merkel as chancellor. We didn't always have the loving relationship that we've had with Germany as of recent days. This is a beginning. This is something that needs to be built. Trust not only needs to be built, but it needs to be earned.
Listen, as far as Germany is concerned, it's completely incorrect. If you look at Schroeder and Helmut Kohl beforehand, there were great relationships there between the German chancellors and the American presidents, going back to Reagan and then, of course, Clinton, between him and Kohl. So I completely disagree as far as that's concerned. Again, you're looking at Cuba, you're looking at these septuagenarians, octogenarians who are leading Cuba and cracking down on their people, not letting them speak freely, not letting them travel to the United States. What is America getting as part of this deal outside of business?
I think that's
and what are the Cuban people getting?
It's a fair question. I mean, you look at some of our friends at Saudi Arabia, for example, right? And you could make the point, well, that we're getting something out of that because we need a friend in the Middle East.
Right.
We need access to their oil market. And so there are some reasons for that. Hang on. I believe Mr. Castro has just finished speaking. Let's listen in now to see what President Obama says.
President Castro,